I hope this works. Okay, so it obviously doesn't like that one. This guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Da da da, this guy, da da da, this guy. Do I need a parallels? Parallels. This guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Da da da, this is da da this. I'm going to fly for you. I'm going to fly for you. This guy, this guy, this guy.
Every episode in BFB led to a team being up for elimination. However, that doesn't mean they had to be the team being put up for elimination. There were ways to avoid that. I'll talk about them here. However, I'll try to keep it realistic as something the characters would do, so you won't see me say that for the challenge in BFB4, Black Hole would have to kill everyone so the rest of the teams can't do anything, thus making their team be the one safe. Clearly that would never happen, so you won't be seeing any of that. With that being said, let's get into the video. In BFB1, Ions loses, and it's mainly due to the terrible leadership from Pencil and Match, primarily their influence on Lightning, as there were no rules saying flying contestants can't participate, and Puffball and Cloudy both fly up to help their team with the baskets. So for these alternative result, someone like Bubble would have to stand up, and instead of following the orders of Pencil and Match, Bubble would tell Lightning to fly up, and giving different suggestions for what to do, instead of denying Pencil of telling Lightning to harm others, possibly is not against the objectives of the Alliance, as Pencil tends to say, so Pencil and Match
Alright, so I need to... Bà tớ biết cái bài. Well, at least I don't use this email. It truly is a good thing that I don't use that email. Bishkishka, dishkishka, bishkishka, dishkishka.
Which would allow Lightning to follow Bubble's suggestion, and though possible, I really doubt Lightning is as weak as Cloudy, as to not be able to push a basket, especially because Balloony just used his air to get the basket to X, which means it's not particularly heavy. That is option 1 however, because I'm sure some of you may think that in this alternate universe, it's decently possible that Pencil doesn't let Lightning follow what Bubble says nonetheless for whatever reason Pencil thinks of. In that case, Bubble could have a backup plan, where Fanny propels her upwards, and due to being very lightweight, Bubble manages to get up. Once there she can tilt the basket to the right, so the propeller moves forward towards X, hopefully relatively quickly, in the case Pencil tells Lightning to go pop Bubble. Before moving on to BFB2, here's the cooked meter. Basically I'll rank from 1 to 5, how cooked the team is, based on my solution, how realistic or not it is, how hard or difficult would it be to perform, and how likely it is 4 or X would allow it. You get the drill. A 1 would be perfectly doable, a 5 would be near impossible.
You?
To have saved themselves from being up for elimination. With that being said, I give this team overall a 3 out of 5 in the cooked meter. It's quite likely for this plan to work, as long as Pencil doesn't feel like being controlling and tell Lightning to stop Bubble. Now it could happen, so it's a 3 out of 5, as there's that possibility. However, I don't see Pencil doing so, as though Pencil is very controlling. I don't see from what perspective could Pencil think the actions of Bubble trying to suggest ways the team could win, that aren't defending Fanny or something along the lines of that, could be considered her being against the alliance. In BFB2, Beep loses. The challenge is to find someone inside a jawbreaker. However, there may not be somebody in some of them, which means that theoretically it's exclusively up to luck, and Beep got unlucky as they did open a jawbreaker, with nobody inside. That's why the solution is to increase the chances of having somebody be in a jawbreaker, and here's how. So as 4 doesn't specify that you must take the jawbreakers out of the drop zone, Balloony's strategy of using Rocky's acid to speed up the process could have been altered to be used while being above the drop zone. That way the acid could have landed on multiple jawbreakers, which if Rocky's acid is enough and there's no need to refill Rocky or any sort of time constraints, it should result in multiple jawbreakers being opened by Beep at once, which should be faster enough to beat a good amount of teams. And if Rocky runs out of barf, they could always get Rocky to chomp nickel, or more if needed. So in the end, unless they're really unlucky, there should be at least one person trapped in one of the jawbreakers. I give this solution a 2 out of 5 in the cook meter. There's nothing that prevented this team from having a slightly different idea, or having someone suggest this slightly altered plan. It's a 2 because there's a small possibility that 4 may not like Team Beep exploiting a possible technicality in his wording. I don't see this outcome happening though, unless 4 doesn't want multiple teams possibly being put up for elimination. Even with that, in the case Team Beep ends up finding multiple members, 4 could always put one of the found members into more of the remaining jawbreakers as a solution. Due to not having any flying members, Team Ice Cube struggled to the point where they lost. However, they're not the only team without any flying members, and that's who they could beat. Avoiding elimination barely, they did have a decent enough idea, that being to explode Bomby for boosts. However, we know that backfired, so we'll just say that hypothetically, they instead thought of a slightly different idea, that being that as there's no rules that clarify that all members must be seated in the swing.
Get into your team swings, people! Spin all the way around 50 times to win.
and instead 4 only claims that the swing must do 50 spins. Team Ice Cube should sabotage 8 names said at once, and they think of it doing so by exploding Bomby, not to boost themselves this time, but to sabotage the other team, and as we know that ends up in the swing getting destroyed. The 8 names would have no shot at avoiding elimination. The only thing they could do is try and sabotage Team Ice Cube before they beat them in amount of swings. I don't see that happening on time though, so Team Ice Cube is safe. 2 out of 5 in the cooked meter. I've got a similar opinion as the one with Team Beep, unless 4 doesn't like Team Ice Cube exploiting the lack of a clarification of not sabotaging other teams. Team Ice Cube should be good. And the idea was slightly different, just coming up with a different intention. Instead of thinking of this helping them, they thought of this hindering the others. I think it's pretty realistic. Death Pact loses due to their bad drawing, and compared to the previous teams, this time it's very tricky to help them, and the solution is quite an unlikely scenario, as it's a slightly different telling of events. So remember when Pillow tells the others to leave her to deal with the flying forks? Well, the only thing that has to change in this timeline is for Pillow to say this earlier. That's it, as that would allow for the exact order of events in the episode to continue, with the one difference being that this time, Death Pact has a lot more time to think of something more than the simplistic drawing pen made, but also a lot more time for something more detailed and better to be made. With that being said, this team was pretty cooked, due to their death prevention obsession, which limited drastically what could have realistically happened, so I give this team a 4 out of 5 in the cooked meter. Could have happened, but it clearly didn't. It's still a doable solution though, so it's not a 5, it's a 4. Beep loses for the second time, and unlike their first time which realistically they could have easily avoided being put up for elimination, BFB5 is for sure without a doubt the scenario that was the most difficult to come up with a way for them to avoid elimination realistically. As though I came up with somewhat of a solution, I'd still consider their loss completely unavoidable. Anyways, in BFB5 Stapy made it so his team would fall indefinitely, while Team Beep was falling too due to losing control of their plane, though they still could recover. The main problem here is that Team Beep came up with a solution that was logical and would have worked, that being that if they keep falling, try to influence the wind to manage to avoid the ground and go through the crack. In fact, this plan would have worked, if it weren't for the fact the team didn't notice that Stapy's staples were holding the ground together, and about 2 seconds before Team Beep is about to enter the crack in the ground, the staples stop holding the ground, making the ground move forward, and that causes Team Beep to crash into the ground. So clearly here, the problem is that Team Beep was given absolutely no reaction time whatsoever, which is why the only solution is really unrealistic, as it didn't happen in the episode at all, but here it is. So going back in time by quite a lot before they crash, Team Beep is falling. However, in this scenario somebody on the team notices what Stapy is doing, and comes to the conclusion that the staples will stop holding the ground at some point. So with that being acknowledged, they somehow get a slightly better hold of the paper plane's trajectory, and decide to go into the crack in the ground, but further away from the cliff, which was the original idea even in the episode. But because they realized earlier, this time they landed far away enough from the ground of the cliff, to where they barely don't land in the ground. BFB5 is for sure the most cooked scenario, and I can't see this really happening at all. There's way too many things that need to happen for this to even be doable, and nonetheless we know that nobody even noticed the staples thing at all from Team Beep in the episode. It's a solution that gets a 5 out of 5 in the cooked meter, extremely unrealistic and difficult to have done. Sorry Beep, but David should have kept his eyes opened. In BFB6 the losers lose, as Clock gets the twinkle at the last second. The solution is simple. A bit before Bell hits the loser's basket, everyone's talking about who they think might have the twinkle, implying that they're aware the challenge is still ongoing. So when Clock says he's going to find out what is causing the noise, someone should have come to the reasonable conclusion that it must be someone trying to get in to give them the twinkle, or at the very least someone trying to get in, which they should avoid, as they have been doing good in the challenge so far. Ideally loser as his simps followed whatever he said lol. With that being said, it clearly didn't happen. Not even Pin, who wasn't a fan of everyone's zombie-like behavior with loser, thought of something different. However, in reality, it's a pretty simple remark and assumption. So nonetheless, I see BFB6 as the actual unlikely scenario. It's pretty surprising considering how many actually relatively smart characters are in this team, yet none said anything, so I give this a 1 out of 5 in the cooked meter. It's not like the team was full of markers and bottles. A better name than that loses due to being on the moon, though 8 names said at once are also trapped in the moon with them. Anyways, the plan to control remote was the only doable solution. As for context, the rocket ship was not working, so there was nobody on Earth to defend their pit, also the reason why the team Barf Bag learned about Spongy at this point in time, as she should ask questions only Spongy would know.